Welcome to It's a Crime. I'm Linda, and today we're going to be talking about a Friday night fishing trip gone wrong, and now 3 people have been arrested in connection with it. But before I get started, if you'd like to be part of the It's a Crime community, please click that subscribe button below, hit that notification to all. Please like if you support it, and also share this out where you can. Now, let's get into it. On Friday, July 17th, 2020, 3 guys decided to go night fishing just outside of their little town called Frostproof, Florida. It's a small little town of just over 3,200 people and located about an hour and a half south of Orlando. Now, not long after they had to go fishing, all 3 guys were said to be beaten and shot to death. Damion Tillman, 23 years old, Keven Springfield, 30 years old, and Brandon Rollins, 27 years old. They were described as best buddies for years and go fishing frequently. Now, I was working on this video yesterday, and then of course new information came out, so I'm now going to give you guys a timeline of what happened and who the 3 people are that have been arrested. So the 3 people that have been arrested are Tony Wiggins. He goes by TJ, and he's 26 years old. His younger brother Robert Wiggins is 21 years old, and TJ's girlfriend Mary Whittemore is 27 years old. I'll get to their background in a minute and their story in a minute. Let's go to the timeline. We'll start with Damion Tillman. Before meeting up with Keven and Brandon, Damion goes to the Dollar General store to purchase something. At 9:56 p.m., Damion is at the checkout counter and buys a product, and it hasn't been identified by the authorities what the product was. TJ happens to be in the same store, along with Robert and Mary, and TJ checks out 15 seconds after Damion does. Now, while in the store, Damion had a conversation, and authorities said that the camera footage didn't have any audio, but they said from the body language it wasn't violent or animated at all, just a normal conversation. Then Damion tells the clerk, "We're going fishing," and in a small town of 3,000 people, you tend to have chit-chats with people around town. Everybody kind of knows everybody. So Damion tells the clerk, "I'm going fishing with Keven." So Damion leaves in his red truck from the Dollar General store and heads directly to the lake to meet up with Keven and Brandon. And in less than 10 minutes, they all would be massacred. Now, as TJ, Robert, and Mary are leaving the store, Robert and TJ are talking, and he says, "Yeah, Damion's going fishing with Keven." TJ says, "What? Keven is going to be there?" So when they leave the store, TJ tells Robert that he's driving, and he says, "Go to the lake." So they do. And Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd mentions in a press conference that TJ, Robert, and Mary didn't have plans to go to the lake until TJ heard about Keven being there. So Damion meets up with Brandon and Keven, who happen to be in a white truck, and they meet at the lake just off of Lake Streety and US Highway 27, which is about a 10-minute drive or so away. And the sheriff describes the area as, "This is a clay road that runs off of Highway 27. It's orange groves and cow pastures and a beautiful lake. A quiet community except for Friday and Saturday night." So they meet up, and their trucks are in a way that it is driver side to driver side so they can have a conversation. And that was in the middle of the road. Keven is in the driver's seat in that white truck, and Brandon is in the passenger seat, and remember, Damion is in the red truck. So according to the sheriff, Grady Judd, he says, Robert then drives and pulls up behind the white truck driven by Keven. TJ exits his truck. As he did, Brandon got out of the vehicle and shined a light back to see who was pulling up behind them. TJ rushes up to Brandon, pushes him against the truck. TJ pulls a handgun out and says, "Where is Keven?" And Keven is sitting in the driver's seat, and TJ looks and sees Keven. So TJ runs around between the red truck and the white truck, and he points the gun at Keven, and TJ says, "Where's my truck?" And Keven goes, "I don't know what you're talking about." And TJ says, "Yeah, you do. Where is my truck? You sold the engine out of my truck, And Kevin says, I don't know what you're talking about. TJ then hits Kevin, and the sheriff says that's according to the information they received. Now Damion starts to open the door of his vehicle and is screaming at TJ, put the gun away, put the gun away, put the gun away. And TJ's out of control screaming, and he says, where's my truck? And he starts shooting at Kevin and Brandon inside of the white truck. And it's still being investigated, but it is estimated that TJ shoots Kevin and Brandon 9 to 10 times between the two of them. Then TJ turns to Damion and starts shooting Damion, who has his door open but is in the truck and is shot several times. Then TJ goes back to Kevin's truck and happens to drop the magazine to his firearm. He can't find it. So he opens the truck door and Kevin falls onto the ground, and that's where they found him later on. TJ finds the magazine to his handgun, and then he calls out to Robert. Robert said he was sitting in the truck the whole time and never got out. And he said that's when TJ pulled the gun. He started to get out of the truck when that happened, but he says when he did, it was all over. And then the sheriff says, you can believe what you want about that statement. TJ then tells Robert, come here, help me put Damion in the truck. So they grab Damion, and the sheriff said there's blood evidence all over the place. So the authorities don't know if Damion is out of the truck or in the truck at this time. But Robert and TJ then pick Damion up and heave him into the back of the pickup truck with his foot sticking up over the edge of the bed. And then they leave. Now, this one little statement is odd to me because you have Kevin who falls to the ground when TJ opens the door, and Kevin is found on the ground. Yet they want to pick Damion up and put him in the truck, and they go and put him in the truck bed. I find that odd. Why bother with one and not the other? Just a few thoughts. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Now, at some point that this altercation happens, Brandon grabs his phone and calls his dad Cyril. And that was around 10:06 p.m. And Brandon's dad said that he doesn't normally get a call from Brandon when he's out. He said that Brandon said, help daddy, help daddy. And Cyril said the moment that he realized his son was calling, he knew it was bad news. He said he doesn't ever call my phone at all unless he's having trouble. So he rushes out and goes to where the guys are. He knows that they're fishing, and he arrives there about 10 minutes later. Once he gets there, Brandon is still alive, but the other two buddies are deceased. And here's what his dad says. When I got there, I was looking for my son. It was a mess. I found my son. I was holding him. He was telling me what happened, but I was too shocked. And according to the sheriff, Brandon manages to tell his dad some pertinent information, but since it's an investigation, he couldn't announce what it was. And the sheriff says his son is saying some things to him which obviously we're not releasing to the public at this point in time, and that's maybe too bad for the suspects of the murder and good for the investigation. And he goes on to say, here's what the murderers didn't count on. One of our victims, Brandon Rollins, was able to call his father and say help. So Brandon's dad rushes to go help him and then realizes he forgets his phone back at the house. So he rushes to a nearby convenience store to get help and to call 911. By the time he gets back on scene, Brandon has died. And medics and emergency crews, when they arrive, it's just too late for Brandon. And Brandon, Kevin, and Damion are now gone. And according to the sheriff in his latest press conference, he said the emergency room could literally be across the street and it wouldn't have helped him. He said it was that bad. And when describing the scene, the sheriff said, this is a horrific scene. I've been to a lot of murder scenes and this is ranked among the worst I've been to. Now back to the three suspects. They then go to an undisclosed location and supposedly strip down the gun, take it apart, and throw it away. Then they immediately go to McDonald's in Lake Wales and order 10 cheeseburgers and 2 McChicken sandwiches. They go through the drive-thru. Now, I just want to ask, what the heck is up with that? Because Alex Cox did the same thing. After putting Tylee in the pet cemetery after she was dismembered and burned, he gets hungry and goes to the local taco joint. Like, it's really bizarre. Anyways, these guys go to the McDonald's. Now, the sheriff says while at McDonald's, he says it's very quiet. TJ simply says we weren't there. And that's all the conversation that those three will admit to. And the sheriff believes there's more conversation to that. I wouldn't doubt it. So the next day, on Saturday, July 18th, Robert takes the truck, which actually belongs to another relative. He takes it to a car wash because it's coated in red mud, and he cleans it up. The owner, who's that relative, is upset because he was supposed to go to a place called Avon Park in her truck and brought it back looking like this. She said that. So Robert cleans it up. The authorities asked, "Did you clean the inside?" And they said, "No, we didn't." And the sheriff said, and this is the best, I love the sheriff at this point. He's great. He throws in a little bit of shade to these guys wherever he can. It's great. He says, "Well, duh, they did clean it up. We found trace evidence of blood where TJ was sitting in the passenger side of the vehicle." Now, by Monday, the authorities find the suspects and describe that they were living on Sarver Avenue in a family compound with camper trailers. They were living off the grid, no running water, no electricity, and it was described that they had some generators. And the sheriff says, "We literally have to walk the road and we go down a dirt path through the woods that opens up into a compound off the grid. That's how far out the woods this is." So they were all interviewed. Robert and Mary consistently lie for TJ, and TJ lied. The sheriff says the only common thread that all these guys had was the McDonald's food. They ordered the 10 double cheeseburgers and the 2 McChicken sandwiches. That's the only thing. He said there was all kinds of stories. They then execute a search warrant at the compound. TJ had 2 shotguns and 2 SKS 7.62 rifles. He's a convicted felon, and so he's not allowed to have firearms, so he's immediately arrested. Now, the forensic team found 1 9mm shell casing at TJ's trailer, and they compared the shell casing at the scene and the one found at TJ's trailer. They found the shell casing at the scene and TJ's were all fired from a Smith & Wesson handgun, and both the cases were fired from the same weapon. So on Tuesday, they went back to the scene and asked Robert and Mary to be interviewed as well, and Tony lawyered up at this point. Mary makes some admissions, and she said she bought the ammunition and TJ was with her back on July the 9th, and the sheriff says he has video of that. He also says that Mary gave multiple stories. They pressed her for details, and then she figured, uh-oh, and she lawyered up as well and didn't cooperate any further. Then the authorities talked to Robert, and the sounds of it, Robert was the one who was describing a lot of these things that happened. And the sheriff talked about the conversations between Robert and TJ at the Dollar General, like I talked about earlier. So TJ Wiggins has been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Here's where it gets even crazier. Are you ready? TJ first was arrested when he was 12 years old, and he's now 26. TJ has 230 felony criminal charges. And Sheriff Judge says the 230 felony criminal charges, and then he says, I didn't stutter, 230 felony criminal charges. I seriously love this guy. He says TJ has 15 convictions and has been to state prison twice. And then the sheriff described TJ as pure evil in the flesh. He's wild and he's out of control. And let me tell you, when I saw the laundry list of charges, it's unbelievable. Like burglary everywhere, theft, grand theft, possessions of drugs, weapons. The sheriff mentioned that this guy attacked someone over the age of 65. It just goes on and on. I've never even seen a list this long. It's crazy. How the heck, after 230 felony criminal charges, is this guy walking around in society? Like, clearly, he has not learned his lesson, in my opinion. Now, Robert Wiggins, TJ's brother, is charged with 3 counts of accessory and 1 count of tampering with evidence. He does have a misdemeanor in his criminal history, and that's about it. Mary is charged with the same 3 counts of accessory and 1 count tampering, no criminal history, and the sheriff said that these all could be upgraded in this case. The investigation is ongoing. One thing he did mention, which was pretty impressive, depending on how many homicides there were, he says, our homicide detectives are simply the best. We've only had 2 unsolved homicides in the last 10 years. And they solved this as fast from Friday to Tuesday, which is pretty darn good. Now, at the end of the press conference, the reporters were asking about motive, and he says that, you know, there wasn't any beer, no drugs, nothing, he says, in the guys' vehicle. And in the suspects' vehicles, he said there is no drugs. He says the only info is TJ allegedly is mad at some truck deal that happened some period time ago. And then the sheriff said that they hadn't had time to dive into it. And he called it a civil disturbance, but it will come together later, is what he said. The only conflict we see is this, he says, where's my truck? I heard you sold the engine out of my truck. Where's my truck? And for that, this guy massacres 3 young men, 23, 27, and 30, on their way fishing Friday night near Frostproof. It's gut-wrenching. He describes TJ and he says, this is evil in the flesh. This is a guy who can hurt you just because it's the right thing for him to do in that moment and time with his 3 brain cells. Kind of hard not to laugh after he said that. I love this guy. He says, our goal, and we pray the state attorney can seek the death penalty. He needs to receive a fair trial, the appropriate appeals, and then be executed. And you know what? Legally, we can't execute him like he did those 3 guys who were just trying to fish on Friday night, nor would we suggest that the system be as barbaric as his conduct towards our 3 victims. Now, at the end of the press conference, it's really sad. He says about the parents of these guys, he says the folks that lost their loved ones that night are poor people. We've had a lot of people offer to give us more money for a reward. We don't need that. But if there's an inclination to help these folks bury their loved ones, I'm certain that would be appreciated, because there's nothing worse than having to bury your child, unless it's you're having to bury your child and you don't have any money. I'm going to leave the information below if you want to take a look or to donate. So you'll be able to see that in the pinned comment below and also in the description below this video. And from Polk County Sheriff's Office, it does say that the Polk Sheriff's Charities Incorporated will collect funds on behalf of the victims' families. And it says that you can donate by check, you can donate by credit card as well. This is absolutely a heartbreaking story. You have 3 guys just wanted to go fishing, hang out, have some laughs, you know. And when I first heard of this and I was diving in, it kind of seemed really weird because it was a 3,000 population town, which is so small, a lot of people know each other. And I thought, how would anybody know to go on this dirt road at 10 p.m. at night, you know, unless he was followed or something. And then as I was ready to record yesterday, or I guess it would be last night, I was ready to record, and then I started seeing some information come in that there was another guy they were looking at. And then this morning, obviously, here I got the new information that 3 people were charged. So I'm pretty impressed that they got this all figured out and these guys are arrested so soon. What I'd like to know is how somebody who has 230 felony charges is still walking around and being able to walk around freely like this. I don't understand. Perhaps you can give me some insight if you live in Florida and you understand what happened here, because I'm scratching my head. Had this guy not been, you know, in society, these guys still would be alive, in my opinion. So it's just really super sad. Let's have a chit chat. Please subscribe, please like, and please share. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.